everyone. My name is Mademoiselle Lena, and you can find me online at www.conjureknits.com. This past Sunday on Conjure Crew, we were talking about fairies, and we were actually talking about the Fairy Oracle and the books that Brian Froud had written. And I do have a couple of his books here. I have the good fairies, and you flip it over and then you have the bad fairies. And then I also have his book Fairy Tales. Now today though, we are going to be starting a brand new virtual book club. And let me just set these back here. We're starting a brand new virtual book club, and we are going to be reading Enchantment of the Faerie Realm by Ted Andrews. I will have the words up here on screen so you guys can follow along, and then we can, take little breaks and pauses and discuss things so we can learn more about the Fae. They're something else. Okay, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Enchantment of the Faerie Realm. Communicate with Nature Spirits and Elementals by Ted Andrews. Narrated by Terrence Bays. Introduction. A Fairy Tale. A man by the name of Brian made his living by cutting rods and making baskets to sell. One year, he was unable to find the right rods to make the quality baskets for which he had come to be known. It was a bad time for Brian, and he didn't know what he should do. It happened that there was a glen outside of his town where remarkably fine rods would grow, but nobody dared to cut the rods, for everyone thought it to be a fairy glen. Brian didn't really believe the story, but he honored it in spite of his disbelief. Things being difficult, Brian decided he would have to go to the glen anyway. The next morning he arose early. He went out to the glen, and before long he had 2 fine bundles of rods. As he was tying them together and preparing to leave, a fog gathered around him in the glen. Afraid to move, he sat, hoping to wait it out. The fog only grew worse, and before long it had grown so thick and dark that he could not see his hand before his face. Being afraid to wait any longer, he decided to test his luck and try to find his way home. As he wandered blindly about the glen, he spied a distant light and moved in its direction. Before long, he came to a big house. The door was open, and a fine light poured out the door and the windows. As Brian poked his head in the door, he saw an old man and woman sitting next to a fire. They smiled and invited him to sit by the fire. As they talked, the old man asked Brian to tell him a fairy tale. Brian said, "That is something I have never done in my life. I don't believe in fairies and don't know any fairy tales." "At least then," said the old woman, "fetch us some water for your keep." Brian took the bucket and went outside to the well. As he pulled up the water, he accidentally knocked the bucket down the well. As he reached for it, he lost his balance and tumbled after it. He fell further and further until he landed softly at the bottom. But there was no water at the bottom of this well. There was a light, though, and as he moved to it, he saw an even bigger house. Inside this one was a group of people gathered for a party. A beautiful girl stepped forward and greeted Brian. "How wonderful that you arrived fares better. As he stepped out of the church, the young girl was waiting for him. Beside her were 4 men holding a coffin. 3 of the men were short, and the 4th was so tall that when they raised the coffin to carry it, it was shaky and lopsided. One of the men spoke. "We must go get a doctor so we can shorten the legs of the big man to make the carrying level." "Well, look no further. Brian is the best doctor in Ireland," the young girl exclaimed. "That is something I have never done in my life. I don't know anything about doctoring," Brian protested yet again. "Don't make me a liar," the young girl laughed, and she handed Brian a doctor's bag. Brian took an instrument from the bag and cut off the big man's legs just below the knees. Next, he removed a small piece from each of the lower halves to shorten them. Then, he stuck the legs back together. The big man was now level with the other 3. Brian was astounded by what he had done. The 4 men hoisted the coffin and began to carry it off. The young girl followed. She turned and waved for Brian to come along as well. As he hurried to catch up, he did not see an open well along the path. He stepped and fell into it. He tumbled down, falling further and further. And then he landed softly on the grass next to the well, outside the home of the old man and woman. He caught his breath, and then filled the water bucket which lay beside him. He took the bucket back to the house. The old man and woman were sitting where he had left them, right next to the fire. It was as if he had never been gone. He set the bucket down and sat down between them. "Now, Brian," said the old man, "can you tell us a fairy tale?" "I can," Brian answered softly. "I am a man who definitely believes in fairies, and I have a story to tell." I don't remember a time in my life when I did not see and hear the fairies. As a child, some of my strongest memories are of meeting those of the Faerie Realm through reading simple fairy tales. I was a voracious reader, and anything that had the least bit of fantasy and fairy lore to it could hold me entranced. I remember many nights reading and rereading certain fairy tales while curled up on my bed or in a chair. On many occasions, I could feel the presence of others, although I could not always see them. Sometimes, slight indentations would appear on the bed around me, as if others were settling in to enjoy the stories as well. The first sights were of flickering lights, and of a little bearded man lighting a pipe as he leaned against the wall at the head of my bed frame. He would nod, as if to tell me to keep on reading, and as I read, he seemed to hear my thoughts as words, just as if I were reading aloud to him. Rarely did he speak, but he made his thoughts well known. For the most part, he seemed content to just listen, although his rugged features could change sharply if elves or dwarves were described within the stories in a manner that was obviously offensive and false. At such times, he would snort and look disgusted. Then he would motion with a wave of his hand for me to continue. Sometimes I did read aloud, using a whispered voice, and on those occasions the lights would grow stronger around me, and there would always seem to be more of a crowd. Much later, when I read the story of Peter Pan, I was always struck by the similarity of my own scene with that of Peter Pan, sitting outside the window and listening as Wendy told her brothers stories of Neverland. I have seen this little man many times in my life, and I consider him my good luck dwarf. Although this term tends to make him seem like some kind of mascot, he is anything but. He is a wonderful teacher and friend who accepts me as I am. He has shared his magic over the years and opened the mysteries
Hmm. So, what do you guys think so far? Do you have any thoughts on this about the story of the well, or about Ted was saying about the man who would come and visit him? When my daughter was maybe like 3 years old, between between 2 and 4, she used to run up and down the hallway. It was like the living room was here, and then we had this hallway, and her bedroom was down here. And she would run from her bedroom down the hallway into the living room, circle around the couch, and run back down the hallway and back into her room, and just back and forth like she was doing laps or something. And she would always be laughing and playing and giggling and stuff and carrying on. One day I looked over, and I shit you not, there was a little pup chasing her. And then after they circled the couch to go back down the hallway to the other end, she was chasing the little pup. And so sh my daughter is amazing. She really is amazing. Um, but she had a little fairy friend. And sometimes, we hear about imaginary friends and things like that. But do y'all ever stop and think that maybe those could be fairies that the kids are playing with? That they're not imaginary. It's just that we ourselves can't see them. It's because, and it's what he was talking to about keeping the magic alive. I never ever told my kids. I never even told them about Santa Claus. I never said, the thing like he's not real. None of that. I let them believe because I wanted the magic to live on. So, hi, welcome to the book club. Glad to have you here. Go ahead and drop a comment. Introduce yourself. Um, so anyway, yeah, she would play with that little puck for hours, and she played with him for a long, long time. Um, and she's we had this fairy tree out in the yard, and we would take Cream out there and talk to the fairies and different things like that. But I found this very interesting, the story about the well, how he didn't believe in fairies until he actually fell into a fairy realm at the bottom of the well. And then all of a sudden, when he fell in another well, he was right back where he started. I thought that was pretty cool. If you did miss the first part of the video, you can always go back and rewatch it to understand what I'm talking about with the well. Okay, let's go ahead and keep going.
1. Fairies, elves, legends, and myths. Nothing fires the imagination as much as the idea of fairies and elves. Unfortunately, in our search for the modern life, we have grown insensitive to the nuances of nature. We have built boundaries, and we guard ourselves from that which we do not understand. It lands that formed our ancient myths and legends. Humanity is discovering that many of our myths and legends are founded in truth. This is why they still intrigue and fascinate. They touch a primal chord. Information regarding the ethereal realms is plentiful and found in every part of the world. Whether called Tir na Nog, Neverland, Eden, or Avalon, the Hesperides, Elysium, Emhine, or Middle-earth. From the ancient Sumerians to the ancient Greeks, the existence of other realms, side by side with ours, is an established belief. The information, though, is not always verifiable, and maybe this is as it should be. For when life loses all of its mystery, it loses much of its vitality as well. Most of what we do know of the fairy realm comes through stories, tales, poetry, and song. Clairvoyants, mystics, and seers are also traditional sources of fairy knowledge. In truth, the awakening to these realms is available to all with a little knowledge, effort, and perception. The realm of fairies is only as far away as we allow it to be. Myths, legends, and even fairy tales are allegories that reflect greater truths and awarenesses. They are all ever becoming. They inspire us to the call of the quest to find our spiritual essence, and how best to reverence it within the physical. Such quests are calls to adventure, but they also reflect times of growth and maturing, times of initiation into higher mysteries. By aligning ourselves with poignant myths and mysteries, our psyche opens. We chase away our boogeymen, and we see better in the dark. And that which expands our awareness and perceptions and opens us to greater possibilities can only be of benefit to our lives. By opening ourselves to the possibilities of a fairy realm, we invite color, creativity, and enchantment back into our lives. And we are blessed by it. Folklore research reveals that people all over the world believe in rare creatures, both superior and subhuman. Some believe them to be less than gods and more than human. Some believe them to be the spirits of the dead. Others see them as remnants of a race of beings older than humanity. Still others see them as part of an angelic or devic kingdom, working through their own form of evolution. Throughout this text, we will examine some of the common threads of this magical realm. It is a synthesis only. Though not scientifically verified, it can be personally experienced. This book is a map to your own quest, based upon past writings and my personal explorations. Unless otherwise footnoted, those threads can be discerned more personally by reading and studying the works in the bibliography, by employing the techniques and exercises provided, and by studying the folklore associated with this subject. There are always those who will simply say that this is just the stuff of fiction. They will say that it is all imagination. No scientific data exists. That it is a fool's quest. That it is even the work of the devil. Humans have a tendency towards smugness. We like to believe that we are the highest and only form of intelligent life. In a universe as vast as that which we live in, such an attitude is arrogant. Just as there are many forces in the universe that we do not yet understand, so there are also dimensions and beings of life that we do not yet recognize or understand. There will always be those who fear contact with any being or energy outside the physical plane. Usually, the people most vehement about it also fear contact with other humans outside of their race, gender, and religion. What one fears, one will often deny and try to destroy. In a universe of infinite energies and life forms, anything that expands our awareness and brings joy to our life can only be a benefit. By opening ourselves first to the possibility and then the realization of actuality, we open ourselves to all the wonders of the world waiting to be explored. We open ourselves to the mysteries of life. We have greater opportunity for fulfillment, prosperity, and joy within our individual life expressions. The world still holds an ancient enchantment. It hints of journeys into unseen and unmapped domains. There was a time when the distances between our world and those we considered imaginary were no further than a bend in the road. Each cavern and hollow tree was a doorway to another world. Humans recognized life in all things. The streams sang, and the winds whispered ancient words into the ears of whomever would listen. Every blade of grass and flower had a tale to tell. In the blink of an eye, one could explore worlds and seek out knowledge that enlightened life. Shadows were not just shadows, and woods were not just trees, and clouds were not just pretty. There was life and purpose in all things, and there was loving interaction between the worlds. Now, we no longer see with a child's or seer's eyes. Instead, we laugh and scoff at those who do. Because of this, the blessed ones have retreated. The abuses we impose on nature and on each other appall them, and though curious about humans, they avoid contact. No world dies completely, however. Those ancient worlds still exist, though the doorways to them are more obscure. Now we must seek them out. There are still noble adventures to undertake. There are still pots of gold at the ends of rainbows, but they must be searched out. I believe in fairies and elves. I believe in trees that speak and caverns that lead to nether realms. I know there are dragons and princesses and wisdom in all things. I have seen angels and devas and beings working with us in all things. My world is full of color and joy and wonder. Every soul has a purpose, but sometimes we get so lost within our day-to-day activities that our lives pass with little purpose and even less joy. At such times, the soul, through its connection with the divine, attempts to remind us that something is missing. The realm of fairies reminds us to keep joy and creativity alive. It is my hope that through this book and its techniques, you will discover your own doorways into this realm and breathe new life into your soul. Venturing between these worlds has often been described as being fraught with dangers. Even if these realms are only touched briefly, the individual often displays recognizable characteristics. A restlessness develops, and the individual's outer life is dimmed by an inner longing. There develops a sense of never truly belonging or fitting in, and yet, at the same time, there is an inner knowing that somewhere is a place where all things could and would fit. An individual who never sleeps, or sleeps very little, is one who may have set foot across those borders. An individual whose dreams are disturbed by images strange and enticing could also be one touched by fairies. Often, individuals who feel the touch of fairies lose definition. In many tales, he or she becomes a ghost, no longer recognized. The self becomes divided. In these tales, such instances often reflect more than what appears on the surface. As we open to new experiences, we will change, and those closest to us and used to us behaving along certain lines will feel we are no longer recognizable. This is disturbing to others, because we are not who we once were. Yes, such experiences can be divisive to the self, but this is most often a good thing. We are not referring to a split personality disorder, but rather we are referring to a division from that old, stale daily ritual of life and the opening to new, creative possibilities. The human essence is a wondrous thing. We are multidimensional, and we have an energy system that enables us to perceive and respond on many levels, physical and otherwise. Unfortunately, most people become locked into a routine and a life pattern that becomes safe and automatic, with little room for anything out of the ordinary. Most people do not want to know about or experience the possibilities of life and energies beyond the physically obvious. Kingdoms of the Divine. This is just one occult construct. There are many dimensions surrounding and interpreting the physical plane. With proper exercise and practice, we can learn to use our own energy systems to connect with the beings of these dimensions. Planes of existence. Divine. Corresponding subtle beings. Gods. Goddesses. Monadic. great planetary spirits, Atmic, Devic, lords, masters, Buddhic, intuitive, avatars, adepts, mental, archangels, astral, great devas, angels, etheric or physical, nature spirits, elementals. The task for those wishing to open to the Faerie Realm is to learn to control and direct those higher perceptive capabilities. The human energy system can be controlled to more easily attune to the subtle influences of life, whether it is attuning to the needs of those around us or attuning to those of the Faerie Realm itself. The fairies and elves are Mother Nature's children. They are as many-sided as nature itself. They vary in size and form and personality. They are not bound to the material precepts we often like to impose. With all of the evidence and all the information that comes through the tales, it is hard, if not impossible, to create a theory that unites them all. The stories are too diverse, and we must ask ourselves, do they need to be organized and united? Like everything about fairies and elves, the sources of their names are ambiguous. The term fairy seems to be derived from the Latin fatum, or fate, in recognition of the skill fairies had in predicting and even controlling human destiny. In France, fear referred to the fairies' ability to alter the world that humans saw, to cast a spell over human vision. From fear came not only fee, but the English word fairy, which encompassed both the art of enchantment and the whole realm in which fairies had their being. Fairy and fae, other derivatives of the parent word, referred only to individual creatures. For the sake of simplicity, in this work, the spelling Faerie will be used to refer to the whole realm, as well as to the individual beings of that realm. A common English term for an individual fairy was elf. This came from the Scandinavian and Teutonic traditions and languages. In Scandinavia, the word for elves was alfar, which could reflect any spirit of the mountains, forests, and waters. This is quite appropriate, since we generally link elves and fairies with all things of the natural world. There will probably be those who will protest the use of fairy and elf generically to represent those of the nature kingdom, but it is not within the scope of this work to delineate all of the variations and names of these beings. Rather, it is an attempt to facilitate the ability to understand and work with them more effectively. The good people, as they are sometimes called, held an important position in the world when each tree had a name, and every deer was recognized, known, and even called by name. They were numerous and very powerful. They played an important role in everyday life. Humans were not the supreme rulers of the physical world. There were many beings in many forms, often equal to humans in cunning, strength, and power. Many fairies worked and lived together with humans when, as humans, we had more of an instinctual and intuitive connection to all life. Fairies assisted us with crops. They taught us lunar and solar cycles of planting. Eventually, though, humans quit listening. As the natural world became tamed, the fairies it sheltered became more elusive. Humans established boundaries and structures. For the fairies, this meant trouble. They are beings for whom neither time nor nature is defined. As forests were claimed and cleared, so began the withdrawal of the fairies. Then, with the rise of Christianity, belief and recognition in these other forms of life were discouraged. Humans cut the links that tied them to the real world of fairies. In the past, sacrifice, song, praise, and prayers were used to strengthen the links to the forces of nature. Today, this is not done. Although the saying of grace before a meal is a remnant of those ancient rituals, it is not enough. When we lose our connections, things die, and the same is true of those more ethereal realms. Many of the tales associated with mischievous and cruel pranks by fairies, for example, turning milk sour, etc., reflect the response to the abuse and neglect of humans toward them and their habitats. Many doors have closed. Some in the fairy realm have withdrawn entirely. They left with the woods. Some have adapted to human life. Others are to be found wherever nature is alive and active. Still others have gone deep underground. There are still house sprites and brownies, and dark elves are often found in basements and attics. Every tree and flower still has its spirit. Every woods has its lady of the woods. Trolls can be seen occasionally in ditches and hanging from metal gratings and the underside of bridges. Where nature is freest and wildest, fairies and elves are most numerous. Today, the fairy realm is not so accessible. The Shadowlands still lie hidden in the countryside, but never are they clearly seen. Any opening in sea or land may mark the borders of enchantment. This can be a whirlpool, lake, cavern, or well. It may be a bend in the road or an intersection of two paths. Though the entrances are elusive, they can be discovered. Children, poets, seers, and healers often find fairies without realizing it. Those with second sight, and humans at peace and in tune with natural surroundings, will have access to these realms and the beautiful beings within them. The rest of this text will help you pinpoint those doors and provide you with ways to open yourself to the joys of the fairy realm.
Okay, so what do you guys think so far? Any thoughts? This kind of he kind of went back over what I was talking about with Taylor having her little imaginary friend. Um, it was definitely a puck, which I guess might be a house elf because it the way it looked. If you guys know what Pan looks like half human, half animal. Like the bottom half was animal and the top half was human. It looked like that, but it was miniature. It was like a dwarf, the size of a dwarf. So okay, if okay, you're just listening. All right, then we'll just keep going then. Okay. All right, we'll keep going.
Experiencing the fairy realm. Although many beings of this realm hide from human contact, the ability to experience them is accessible to all with a little patience and persistence. Those of this realm are intrigued by humans and the vitality for life that we can express. They are around more than you might imagine. As we will see in later chapters, they have many abilities. Although you may not initially see them with physical vision, the places they can be found are very physical and visible. The more time you spend around such places, the greater the opportunity to establish contact. Initially, their presence is translated through the five senses. This may come to you as a scent. You may catch a sparkle out of the corner of your eye. You may find your eyes start to tear a little. You may hear a soft tinkling. The more you pay attention to these perceptions, no matter how slight or imaginary they may seem, the more you will become aware of their presence. Also, be careful about assuming that that which is imagined is the same as that which is not real. They are not synonymous. Most techniques for establishing any kind of spirit contact are simple. They depend upon effective meditative abilities. If we want to open to vision, We must learn to shift eye dominance when in this meditative state. This often happens automatically when we use any kind of altered consciousness. The use of visualization, concentration, and creative imagination will lead to higher forms of inspiration and a fully conscious perception of the fairy realm. Of the three, the creative imagination is most important. Its proper development will open the spiritual background of physical life. We begin to see the spiritual essences and energies surrounding and interplaying with the physical world at all times. Energy translated from the supersensible to the sensible realm of physical life must take the form of images for us to begin to work with them. This is true when working with the fairy realm as well. Those of this realm will often dress and appear according to our imagination and expectation. What we consider imagination is a reality in some form on a level beyond the normal sensory world. With creative imagination, we create new awareness and a new relationship in color and form to this world. Meditation helps us trigger the image-making and perceptive abilities of the mind. This induces right brain activity. Through the right hemisphere of the brain, we see things that may be imaginary, existing only in the mind's eye, or recall things that may be real. We see how things exist in space and how parts go together as a whole. We see that which may be hidden. We understand metaphors. We dream, and we have leaps of insight. The intuitive, the subjective, the relational, the holistic, the time-free mode are all processes of the right hemisphere of the brain. The images created by it reflect our sensory information and data, past, present, and future. The right hemisphere is a more direct line to deeper levels of the subconscious mind, where ancient memories and subtle perceptions are stored. How do we tell if what we are experiencing is a reflection of our creative imagination or an actual fairy contact? In the beginning, we use the meditative exercises, and we observe ourselves in them, imagining how fairy contact might be experienced. What we imagine is very likely a reflection of what we have observed and encountered subconsciously. The subconscious mind is aware of all expressions of energies we encounter, whether we are consciously aware of them or not. Through the meditation, we send a message to the subconscious to give us some feedback on what it is experiencing. The subconscious then translates those experiences to us through the images within the meditation scenario. We open doors through the imagination, and we explore through inspiration. As we stay open to the experience, we will begin to have conscious encounters. We open ourselves to direct fairy perceptions themselves, rather than perceptions of images. We will begin to recognize them tangibly. Everyone's experience may be slightly different. Some may find more success by working with the flower fairies, and others by working with the elementals. I have no trouble seeing fairies within trees and bushes, but I must concentrate to perceive those of the flower realm. Everyone's energy is different, and thus, each must find an avenue that is easiest to work within. The rest of this book provides exercises and techniques to begin your quest into the fairy realm.
So I wanted to stop here. Oops, let me go back to that page. He's going to read through these different steps for this exercise. So you're more than welcome to always review the video and go back and write things down, or you can pause the video and take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. But I really, really suggest going through these exercises in the book, doing the meditations, doing the things that he suggests you do, and that will open you up to fairies, to be able to see them, to be able to communicate with them, things like that, okay? So I just wanted to put that out there. We'll go ahead and I'll start back now.
Exercise 1. This exercise will begin to open your thoughts to the possibility of actual fairy encounters. If you can answer yes to any of these questions, you have probably experienced the fairy realm and just did not realize it. 1. Have you ever seen a flash of light or sudden, quick movement out of the corner of your eye that could not be explained? 2. Have you ever seen flickers of light around your houseplants or flowers? 3. When out in nature, have you ever felt as if the woods themselves were watching you? 4. Have you ever walked down the street and had the fragrance of a tree or flower hit you strongly? This is often a signal that you are being greeted. Some people experience this, while those walking with them do not. 5. Do you or have you ever felt uncomfortable in your basement, attic, or dark areas of the house? Dark elves often take up residence in such places. 6. As a child, and maybe even as an adult, did you need your closet door closed before you could feel comfortable enough to go to sleep? Did you ever see, think, or believe there was something or someone in your closet? Again, dark elves that take up residence in people's homes will often use the corners of a closet. 7. Did you ever have or ever see a child with an imaginary playmate? Often they are not imaginary at all, but are members of the fairy realm. 8. Did you ever observe children playing and see them talking to themselves, especially when participating in outdoor activities? 9. Do you find that talking to your plants helps them grow? 10. Have you ever walked through an open field and found yourself brushing spider webs from your face? Spider webs do not form at face level in open fields. They need something to cling to. Usually in such occurrences, you have been brushed by field fairies. 11. Have you ever heard music or singing from unidentified sources? 12. Do your dreams often and consistently involve outdoor environments, woods, fields, streams, etc.? This can often signal a calling by the fairies to you or memories of times in which you encountered them. 13. Have you ever encountered an old woman while out walking in nature, only to turn around the next moment and find her gone? 14. Have you ever been sitting outside, singing or humming softly, and seen animals draw closer? Fairies and elves often take the form of animals and are drawn to storytelling and music, especially when simple and from the heart. 15. Have you ever found things inexplicably appearing, disappearing, or being rearranged in your house? 16. Do you ever find yourself excessively sleepy when camping or on extended nature outings? The energies of nature spirits can induce altered states, and if sleeping on or near a fairy mound, you may find yourself unusually tired. I call this the Rip Van Winkle syndrome. 17. Do you ever dream of strange beasts or dragons? 18. Do you feel upcoming changes in the weather before there are any signs? 19. Are your favorite times of the day dawn and dusk? Favorite times of the year autumn and or spring? Exercise 2. It is always a good idea to reread some of the old fairy tales. For many people today, favorite forms of literature involve fairy tales, myths, folk tales, and fantasies. This can indicate that there is a connection and that the fairies and elves are trying to reach out. Most people have a favorite fairy tale growing up. Go find that story. If you can, purchase a copy of it in the children's section of the bookstore. If you are not sure what the title is, go to the library and leaf through and read some of the fairy tale collections available. Reread that story as if it were an invitation for you to enter into the fairy realm. See yourself as the main character, or whatever character you are most drawn to. This would not have been a favorite fairy tale for you if it did not resonate within you in a very dynamic way. It can be used to help you understand how you can best perceive, work with, and harmonize with those of that realm. As mentioned earlier, many fairy tales hold truths that go deeper than the surface. They reflect patterns that we are likely to encounter within our life, and they often reveal areas where we can best work with those of this wondrous realm.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here for this week. So thoughts. Let me hear your thoughts. I don't want it to be just me rambling. It's a virtual book club, so let's all discuss this, okay? What were you guys' thoughts? How many yeses did you get? How many no's? Things like that. What do you think? Ooh. Do you like the way that this book club is set up? Is there anything that you would like to change or that you would like to see different? Oh, good, good, good. Yeah, you can, if you want, you can go back and rewatch the video at your leisure. What I figure we'll do is, because there are going to be people who can't catch the whole thing, is, sorry about my dogs. Um, you can always go back and rewatch the video. That's, why I wanted to do it on YouTube, is so that we could save it. You got a lot of yeses? Yeah, I was too. I got a lot of that too. You like the virtual readings? Good, good. I thought about reading it to you guys, but I was just like, no. Because I'll lose my voice and blah, blah, blah. And this way too, I can sit back and be a participant. Aw, I will. Thor is just a big baby. He wanted to go outside, and now that he's outside, he's out there barking. Maybe that he sees the fairies. So, all right, guys. Well, let me see. So we'll pick up here next Wednesday. But thank you guys so much for joining me. I was so excited about doing this. It's something new for me, and I hadn't seen it quite like this. I mean, the virtual book club online, free to anybody that wants to join in. But so that's why I wanted to do it this way. But I haven't read through the whole book either, to be honest. So I'm reading right along with you guys. So I'm glad you like it. All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead and go. And I will, yes, it is a lot nicer weather here. It's probably like in the lower 70s. I'm going to go ahead and go. And I look forward to seeing you guys back here next Wednesday. All right. Love you bunches.